This is not just about the Waqf Amendment. It's about the entire narrative that is taking place in the nation. There's a narrative of hate. There's a narrative of demonization of the Muslim community, which is going on purposefully all over the nation. Films which are being created, which are resulting in polarization and communal hatred. Why this is happening? One thing is for sure, that there is a purposeful, systematic spread of hatred in the nation. Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister, in the assembly he says cut mullahs and all that. In Maharashtra, a cabinet minister says ghar mein ghus ke marenge. It is snatching away all the autonomy of the Muslim community. It is centralizing control of the government over the Waqf properties. And it's like, it's a kind of a dacoity over the Waqf properties. We have our mosques on those lands, we have dargahs, we have graveyards, we have ashur khanas, we have different places of worship. And we also have the intention of charity. That is a very specific clause in Islam, that when you give in charity, you don't see who it is. I am also a member of the Waqf board in Maharashtra, and I see that there are so many issues. There are encroachments, as you said, even government properties are constructed on Waqf lands. All this is because Waqf boards are weak bodies. Today, what is being said is that because there are problems, we need to snatch away all the powers. We need to have non-Muslims over these boards. Why? Have we ever raised such objections earlier? No, because the amendments were such which intended reform. These amendments are such which don't intend the exact reform. They show a kind of mistrust. They want to snatch away the autonomy, and they want to make sure that these lands are not in the hands of the Waqf boards at all. What the opposition is trying to defend the Muslim community, because the Muslim community is what is being targeted in this nation. Anybody would agree to that. Do they have to give it in the newspaper that today I am accepting Islam and then after 5 years I'll be able to donate something? This is ridiculous. In Hindu governance, religious governance, this doesn't happen. It doesn't happen in Sikh religious governance. It doesn't happen in Buddhist religious governance. It doesn't happen in Christian religious governance. Everyone has got autonomy. So why not Muslims? When there is a patient who is ill, you treat the patient with the correct diagnosis, but you don't kill the patient. And here you are killing the Waqf boards completely. Do we have documentation for Taj Mahal, which is a graveyard actually? Do we have documentation for the Ajmer Dargah? जैसे मेरे चैलेंज है कि आप ताज महल का डॉक्यूमेंटेशन लाके दिखाइए मुझे.
Hello and welcome to HT's weekly talk show, The Interview. Muslims have taken to the streets. Members of parliament are up in arms decrying the government's dubious design. The trigger? Proposed amendments to the Waqf bill, which the Muslims say is a bid to usurp Waqf properties. The government on its part sees the bill as one that would usher in the much needed reforms. It is difficult to say who's right and who's wrong. Equally, it is important to decode the provisions and decipher the proposed amendments. We have with us Dr. Fauzia Khan, Member of Parliament, a woman and a Muslim, to take us through the controversy. Dr. Fauzia Khan here with us in this edition of HT's weekly talk show, The Interview. Welcome to the show, Dr. Fauzia Khan, and thank you for being here with us.
Thank you for having invited me.
Let me begin by asking you, why this hue and cry over amendments in the Waqf bill?
Well, you see, Waqf has a history in India. The first bill that came up was way back when the British ruled India, that was in 1923. After that, there have been several amendments because, of course, change is always needed, reform is always needed. But this time, this is not just about the Waqf amendment, it's about the entire narrative that is taking place in the nation from different angles. There's a narrative of hate, there's a narrative of demonization of the Muslim community, which is going on purposefully all over the nation in various fields. For instance, in education, scholarships have been stopped. When you talk about issues like love jihad, like, I think it's all fictionalized. There is economic boycott of Muslims, there is bulldozer justice, there are so many other things. There are different films which are being created, which are resulting in polarization and communal hatred. Why this is happening, I don't understand. But one thing is for sure, that there is a purposeful, systematic spread of hatred in the nation. Even people in posts, they are also making statements that shouldn't be. Like the Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister, in the assembly he says cut mullahs and all that. In Maharashtra, a cabinet minister says घर में घुस के मारेंगे, गोली मारो सालों को. All these statements have created a sense of fear, and that is why the intention of the government is suspect.
You just killed my next question, which was that before we get into specific clauses, let me ask you to decode the big picture and further elaborate on this narrative that you're talking about. And also, how fair is it to link the Waqf Bill amendments to this narrative which you're talking about?
See, this is very fair to link this because the very amendments that are there, if you see them clause by clause, you will see that it is absolutely killing the very purpose of reform. It is snatching away all the autonomy of the Muslim community. It is centralizing control of the government over the Waqf properties. And it's like, it's a kind of a dacoity over the Waqf properties, which are actually endowments, which have been donated by forefathers for the purposes of charitable or religious use. For instance, we have our mosques on those lands, we have dargahs, we have graveyards, we have ashur khanas, we have different places of worship, and we also have the intention of charity for the upliftment of the Muslim community, and not only Muslim community. The Muslim community donates for charitable purposes, but it can be anybody. It need not be a Muslim. That is a very specific clause in Islam, that when you give in charity, you don't see who it is. You give it to anybody who is needy.
But would you agree that Waqf properties are mismanaged and also lack accountability? Also, there are huge issues of encroachment.
Yes, I do agree. And I do agree that we need to pay attention to this. And for this very reason, we have had so many amendments. There's always need of reform, and today it's definitely there. I am also a member of the Waqf board in Maharashtra, and I see that there are so many issues. Number one is lack of proper personnel, resources. You have a shortage of people who can manage. It's a large amount of property, and to manage these properties, you need human resource. But human resource is lacking. It's a vicious circle kind of thing, because you generate income from the Waqf properties. The mutawallis are responsible for these properties. They give a share. They should be giving a share to the Waqf board. This share is collected. It makes the corpus. And from there, you spend it on charitable purposes and other purposes. But then when you have to recover this amount from the mutawallis, you must have human resource everywhere who goes to the property, looks at it, takes the money. One issue is that we don't have that human resource. Secondly, there are encroachments, as you said. Even government properties are constructed on Waqf lands. So there is no watch, there is no supervision because of this lack of human resource. There are no proper surveys, there are no proper registrations. All this is because Waqf boards are weak bodies, We don't have proper support from the government. Actually, if the government had supported it fully from the survey point of view, from the human resource point of view, from the point of view of having proper accountability of finances and accounts, if the government would have been kind of patronizing all this properly from a detached point of view, from an objective point of view, there was no objection. Today, what is being said is that because there are problems, we need to snatch away all the powers, we need to have non-Muslims over these boards.
So, don't you think, against this backdrop of what you are saying, that these issues need to be addressed? And as a party and a Muslim MP, would you justify all this corruption, encroachment, mismanagement, accountability? And if the government is trying to improve or maybe stop this or check this, what are your objections?
My objection is not to the reform at all. The reform is needed. 100% reform is needed. We need to correct the things that are happening in Waqf boards. And we all agree with it. But have we ever raised such objections earlier? No, because the amendments were such which intended reform. These amendments are such which don't intend the exact reform. They show a kind of mistrust. They want to snatch away the autonomy, and they want to make sure that these lands are not in the hands of the Waqf boards at all. And the government has the right to decide whether it's a Waqf property or not. The government has the right to decide how the Waqf income will be spent. And the government will decide who will be on the Waqf boards. So, this is absolutely snatching away of the autonomy. And this is not what is expected. We expect reform. We want reform. All Muslims want reform in Waqf boards. We want the lands to be used for their proper purposes, and we want the help of the government, the support of the government in this. But this is not what is happening, and this is extremely tragic.
You know, two wrongs don't make a right, and you said it's been going on. So simply because it's been going on doesn't mean that the government should not step in to correct that wrong. That's one part. The second, when you say there is a mistrust and there is a narrative, don't you think the opposition is because of targeting the BJP, and I underline the BJP government?
I don't agree to this. I absolutely refute this. What the opposition is trying to defend the Muslim community, because the Muslim community is what is being targeted in this nation. Anybody would agree to that. You know, in the name of correction, if you are trying to snatch away the autonomy, that is not what is acceptable. But we do want correction, and we want the government to help genuinely. But this genuineness is what is lacking. And that's exactly what the opposition is saying.
So let us take some specific clauses, and let me ask you, what is the objection to the 5-year clause which prevents a Muslim from giving waqf till he has completed 5 years of embracing Islam? In other words, नए मुसलमानों को इजाज़त नहीं है वक्फ देने की. Doesn't this actually prevent misuse?
See, how will it prevent misuse? Because so far, any person could have donated, any person. It need not be a Muslim to donate lands or donate something. And it can be in terms of cash, it can be in terms of anything movable, immovable. Anything in the name of God can be donated by any person. It was the earlier clause. Now you want it to be only new Muslims. And how will you know somebody has accepted Islam? Should he declare that? If you accept a certain philosophy, do you have to announce that? And how will that announcement take place? Do they have to give it in the newspaper that today I am accepting Islam and then after 5 years I'll be able to donate something? This is ridiculous. And it doesn't happen in any other board or any other governance. In Hindu governance, religious governance, this doesn't happen. It doesn't happen in Sikh religious governance. It doesn't happen in Buddhist religious governance. It doesn't happen in Christian religious governance. Everyone has got autonomy. So why not Muslims? What is wrong? Everywhere, things are not perfect. You know, if we say that things need to be corrected in Waqf boards, there may be things that need to be corrected elsewhere also. So why only here? That is my most important question.
You know, the Justice Such a Committee recommended Waqf reform and stated that encroachments are common, which you also agree. So, isn't the government somehow taking one step in implementing what the Sachar committee recommended?
Well, how do you explain double standards? You show something and you intend something else. That is what is exactly happening. And that's why all this hue and cry, as you said.
The government also says that reforms are a must because only an elite section, and elite may be a wrong word, but maybe a handful or the privileged among Muslims manage these properties. Don't you think a level playing field is required?
I don't think this is right, because we have got mutawallis who look after the lands, and there may be lands in rural areas which are like 1 acre, 2 acre lands, and the mutawallis are extremely poor. They cannot even cultivate their own lands. Even such lands are there. Simultaneously, there are even bigger properties, prime properties in bigger cities. So it must be that in the bigger cities where lands are more expensive, it must be in the hands of people who can afford them. But then it's not limited to those areas. There's a large amount of land, a very large amount, in fact more land in the poverty-stricken areas also. So it's a level playing field, I feel.
Okay, let me ask you, are there any good points in the bill?
Definitely there are. We would always welcome every new bill which has good points. The best point which I would appreciate about this bill is that they have recommended stricter penalties for mutawallis who are erring. They have introduced an amendment which recommends the involvement of more women in the Waqf boards.
I was coming to that, in fact.
So this is a good change. And the most important and the best amendment which I would like to appreciate the government for is the digitization of the properties.
That was my next point.
Yes. So these are good amendments. This is something which the bill should be appreciated for.
What about separate Waqf boards for minority sections like the Aga Khanis and the Bohras?
I don't think this should happen, because this will simply create sects in the community. And moreover, it is not there in any other religious governance, as I told you. For Hindu religious governance, do we have separate boards for different sects in Hindus? No. Do we have different sects in Sikhs? No. In Christians? No. In Buddhists? No. So then why only for Muslims? Muslim is one community. We believe Islam is one community. There may be internal little differences, but that doesn't make it a sect altogether.
Why do you think the government has then introduced the inclusion of the minority sections like Aga Khanis and Bohras? What is their game plan?
Well, they know their own game plan. I wouldn't be able to comment on that, except that we suspect that they are trying to create differences between the different sects that exist in Muslims, which are not there any longer in this country. I don't think there should be any kind of division. They should be getting some representation in the Waqf boards, definitely, but we don't need to have separate boards for them. As it is, the population of these sects also is very small, marginal population. So I don't think this is needed at all.
You praised the inclusion of women. What about the inclusion of non-Muslims as members?
I don't agree to this inclusion. Why should it be? Why shouldn't Muslims be autonomous in their own running of the Waqf boards as other boards? As I told you, other religious governance. Do we have any non-Hindus on the Hindu religious governance? Do we have any non-Sikhs on the Sikh governance? Do we have non-Buddhists on the religious governance of Buddhists or Christians? Then why do you want non-Muslims to be included on Muslim religious governance?
A beginning can be made, and doesn't it really spell out being more inclusive, and if I may use the word secular?
See, religious autonomy is something which the Constitution has given every religious community. And here this bill is contravening all the articles of the Constitution. Article 15, which gives you right to possess, profess, propagate your religion. Article 25, which gives you religious rights. Article 30, which gives you religious rights. So all religious rights are contravened, because why do you want to not allow the Muslims to run their own institutions? Why can't you objectively support from outside?
Because that system has not worked, and there are, as I said, lack of accountability, encroachment, corruption.
Corruption is everywhere. There is corruption in police ranks. There is corruption in the revenue ranks. There is corruption in every department. That way, there is corruption in Waqf board also. So, do we have external forces when you have corruption somewhere? I don't think this is a justified argument. This is not right. Corruption should be handled, but it can be done externally as well. You have stricter penalties. We would appreciate very much if the Waqf Amendment Bill prescribes for stricter penalties for corruption. That will be more than welcome. But that doesn't mean that a Hindu cannot be corrupt and only a Muslim is corrupt. This sentiment is wrong.
You have spoken about the good points, but why is it that in this din and hue and cry, we don't hear of those good points, and all that we are hearing is the negative and the bad?
If this bill is passed, which will be passed very soon because they have the majority, I feel that it is going to be absolutely unconstitutional, absolutely discriminatory, and absolutely unjustified, because there may be some good points, we appreciate them, but there are several amendments which are not very, very comfortable for the Muslims as a community. And if you want to paralyze everything, if you want to snatch away all the rights of the Muslims, you have the right to do it, because we are in minority in any case. But then this is not justice.
Let me use a few quotes. The diagnosis must be correct, but the treatment is not.
Yes, the diagnosis is correct, but when there is a patient who is ill, you treat the patient with the correct diagnosis, but you don't kill the patient. And here you are killing the Waqf boards completely.
Substantiate that.
Why? Because see, the Waqf board will not have any right to declare the property as Waqf. It will be declared by somebody who is the other party. If there is a dispute, this dispute will be between the revenue department and the Waqf boards. Secondly, you are erasing the Waqf by user, which is a traditional kind of tradition that is going on.
In fact, I would like you to elaborate on the Waqf by user clause.
Yes, the Waqf by user has been also emphasized by the court orders many times. Once a Waqf is always a Waqf, and Waqf is Waqf because of its use. For instance, there's a graveyard now where you have people buried for ages, and you don't have proper documentation for that graveyard. So does it not be Waqf if you don't have the documentation? Do we have documentation for Taj Mahal, which is a graveyard actually? Do we have documentation for the Ajmer Dargah? So such old properties which have been in use and as tradition have been Waqf, it is understood, known, everybody knows these are Waqf properties. If you remove this Waqf by user clause, so once a Waqf, always a Waqf will not be true, because this is dedication to Allah, dedication to God by the Muslims. When they donate something, this becomes the property of God. It is not the property of any human being any longer. It's given in the name of God so that it may be used for the purpose of spiritual or religious or charitable purposes. So this purpose itself is defeated. The very name of the bill, the title of the bill also is killing this religious spirit. Although they are calling it Avmeed, I think this is more of a despair for the Muslim community.
When you're talking about Waqf by user clause being removed, just explain to me and decode what is the danger, and in real terms, on the ground, removing this clause, what is the damage it can do?
It can do tremendous damage, because so many properties are not documented. Large amount of properties have been in use as Waqfs, but they do not have proper documentation, because there is a document called Muntakab. You may have the ownership document there in Muntakab, or you may have, there was a gazette made in 1974. So if these properties are part of the gazette, then you consider it as ownership. But अगर वो कुछ भी नहीं है, डॉक्यूमेंटेशन नहीं है, जैसे मेरे चैलेंज है कि आप ताजमहल का डॉक्यूमेंटेशन ला के दिखाइए मुझे, अगर मिल जाता है तो फिर वो वक्फ बाय यूज़र नहीं रहेगा। लेकिन अगर आपके पास डॉक्यूमेंट नहीं है और फिर भी वो यूज़ में है हिस्टोरिकली for so many years, in that case, I think a large amount, I will not quantify it, but maybe to the extent of 3/4 of the Waqf properties will simply be snatched away from the Muslims because they don't have proper documentation.
Maybe a naive solution, and I would be willing to understand it and for you to explain it to me. Don't you think it could be then that a date is put that properties Waqf by user which were there, those remain status quo, and going forward, after the amendments have been introduced, then that clause could be removed? Can that be a middle ground?
Well, there could be some middle ground, but then you have to give time, and you have to give proper justified somebody who can decide whether it's Waqf by user, or whether you cannot give a revenue official that duty to decide whether it's Waqf by user or whether it's some other property when there's a dispute. So who can that authority be? Unbiased authority.
That is a technicality, but can this be a way out? Because I take your point when you say Taj Mahal, Ajmer, Dargah, there can be no documentation, fair enough. But going forward, because just because there can't be documentation for properties which have been there for centuries,
yes,
doesn't mean that going forward, this cannot be improved on.
I think what you are saying has some substance. We can go forward that way, but in that case there has to be extensive survey. Extensively everything will have to be on record, digitized. After that these amendments can come in. So I think the first step should be survey, the second should be digitization, and then we can come in with these amendments. So we'll be happily agreeing with it.
A few more quotes, and I'll quote you again. Death blow to democracy, crushing the voice of minorities and finishing them off. Strong words, Dr. Khan.
Yes, they are strong words, but very justified. I still stand by these words, because if you don't respect the sentiment of such a large section of your own population, of the population of your nation, you don't respect their sentiment, where is the democracy? Because, you know, if you were referring to Sachar Committee report, in the Sachar Committee report, in the introduction itself, they say that the acid test of a democracy is how the government deals with its minorities. If the minorities feel secure and safe, if the minorities don't have any fears in their minds, that is the acid test of democracy. But today we do not have the feeling of safety, security. There is mob lynching, there is bulldozing, there is unjustified, there are cases which are flung upon innocent people. They are imprisoned. So these things do not say that Muslims feel safe in this nation.
Would you agree that Waqf is a route to land grab?
Yes, Waqf is being grabbed, land is being grabbed by everybody. It's being grabbed by the government, it's being grabbed by non-Muslims, it's also being grabbed by Muslims. So these deficiencies are there which should be stopped, and if it should be handled in a very justified and a proper way.
Finally, how do you justify or substantiate that this bill is anti-Muslim?
I justify this bill as anti-Muslim because it's discriminatory, as I told you. Why then such principles are not applied to other religious governance? Why should they be autonomous? Why should nobody interfere in those fields? Why should there be no other non-community members in those religious governance structures? Why only for Muslims? And this is why this smells of discrimination, and we object to this discrimination as citizens of this nation whom the constitution has given the right to profess their own religion, propagate their own religion, and abide by whatever their religion preaches for them. And my question would be, if the BJP and if the government is so fair, why is there no Muslim minister in the BJP government? No representation is needed for such a large section of society? That's my question. How is the Sabka Saath? Sabka Saath, you will decide what you do for them. That is not Sabka Saath.
You know, Dr. Khan, your point about discrimination I take, and when you were explaining this, that was my next question. But isn't discrimination different from being anti-Muslim? And saying that the bill is anti-Muslim, isn't that far-fetched?
Because the between the lines intentions that the Muslim community is reading in this bill or in these amendments that are going to come in the bill, that shows that the government doesn't intend actually genuinely the benefit of Muslims. What the government intends is that the government will govern in a centralized way and snatch away all autonomy from the Muslims. That is why it's anti-Muslim.
Doesn't it, in a sense, fit into the government's game plan of a Hindu Rashtra?
It does. It does. And as I told you initially, that it is not just the Waqf Amendment Bill, it's everywhere, in all sectors, that this is slowly happening. But I don't think Hinduism is a religion that preaches intolerance, that preaches injustice. This is not Ram Rajya. Ram Rajya, as defined by Mahatma Gandhi, was a Rajya where every citizen received justice. And if there's justice for some and injustice for some, it cannot be Ram Rajya. Ram couldn't have preached this kind of a Rajya. So this cannot be a Hindu Rashtra.
Dr. Fauzia Khan, thank you very much. Thank you for your time. And thank you for decoding this complex issue of Waqf.
Thank you very much for having invited me. Thank you.